He's gonna shit on like critical race theory and stuff. So let's watch Donald Trump be a racist piece of shit, and then we'll get back to that ad.
On this very day in 1787, our founding fathers signed the Constitution at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. It was the fulfillment of 1,000 years of Western civilization. Our Constitution was the product of centuries of tradition, wisdom, and experience. No political document has done more to advance the human condition or propel the engine of progress. Yet as we gather this afternoon, a radical movement is attempting to demolish this treasured and precious inheritance. We can't let that happen. Left-wing mobs have torn down statues of our founders, desecrated our memorials, and carried out a campaign of violence and anarchy.
I don't get it. Like, do people actually care about this? Like, how do you, like, why would you give a shit about Confederate statues being toppled when 200,000 Americans have died from a pandemic where the worst that's absolutely could have been prevented? Like, a solid chunk of them could have and should have been prevented. Like, who the fuck gives a shit about Confederate statues? I guess he ties it into, like, the same mob destroying, you know, small businesses or, like, lighting them on fire, making it seem like the overwhelming majority of Black Lives Matter protests are actually violent, where, like, they're just out to, like, destroy property or something like that, which is silly. And anyone who lends credence to those idiotic and oftentimes racially motivated dumbass takes is also either an idiot or racist themselves. I've said this before. Don't be a sucker. 93% of Black Lives Matter protests have been peaceful, and the majority of other protests that were not peaceful were elevated or escalated as a consequence of either white nationalist militias that are there specifically for that purpose, or because of cops. Not agreeing with you is racist? No, just simply disagreeing with me is not racist. You could also be a idiot. I gave you an out. You could also admit that you're a moron, and that's why you're a sucker who got the same kind of media brain disease, and you're saying that, like, the overall completely legitimate grievance of BLM is reduced to wanting to burn small businesses in middle America. I mean, you could either be a racist because you believe that, and you think that, like, black people are just, like, angry and they just want to burn down businesses or some shit. Or you could be a complete moron and believe that because other people are telling you that, and the other people who are telling you that are racist people.
There's no better example than the New York Times totally discredited 1619 Project.
Oh, here it is.
This project rewrites American history to teach our children that we were founded on the principle of oppression, not freedom. America's founding set in motion the unstoppable chain of events that abolished slavery, secured civil rights, defeated communism and fascism, and built the most fair.
Yeah, dude, come on. We're the ones who defeated slavery, so it was okay that we kept it going for as long as we did, and then continued to keep it going with Jim Crow laws that kept black people disenfranchised by and outside of the system. Come on. It is literally the Hitler is not such a bad guy because, after all, he's the one who killed Hitler argument. You know what I mean? It's literally the same argument. Come on, dude. Not such a bad guy, dude. Ology says, yeah, we made slavery illegal, but if we didn't, how would we have been one of the last nations to stop slavery and continue to treat minorities as second-class citizens? True.
The only path to national unity is through our shared identity as Americans. That is why it is so urgent that we finally restore patriotic education to our schools. Under our leadership, the National Endowment for the Humanities has awarded a grant to support the development of a pro-American curriculum that celebrates the truth about our nation's great history. But this past June,
I'm out of control.
Caesar Rodney's statue was ordered removed by the mayor and local politicians as part of a radical...
Am I crazy? I feel like he's hella low energy today, dude. This is the most low energy I've seen him in a while. It really must have hurt his soul that, you know, America is doing the real racism by saying that America was racist. That's the real racism. And of course, like, you know, appropriately and properly covering slavery's fundamental role that focuses on black people and talks about the immoral elements there, that is really harmful for black people because it just reminds them. And honestly, like, what we need to do right now is just make them forget that slavery ever happened. That's what's best for black people, I think. And also for the white people that have already been taught that slavery wasn't that important.
The legacy of 1776 will never be erased. Our heroes will never be forgotten. Our youth will be taught to love America with all of their heart and all of their soul. We will save this cherished inheritance for our children, for their children, and for every generation to come. This is a very important day. Thank you all once again for being here.
So here's what I think. Do you want to know what I think? First of all, like, people have critiqued the 1619 Project, talking about how it focuses too much on slavery, or it's like there's like ahistorical elements of it or whatever, blah blah blah, all this shit, right? Ultimately, one way or the other, I think the 1619 Project overall is providing necessary information for a lot of people. It's understandable that it would be taught in schools. Slavery has played a significant role in the development of the United States of America. It absolutely has. Critical race theory, though, overall, or even the 1619 Project and shit like that, or white fragility, a lot of this stuff, I don't think really pushes the needle. Like, I don't think it really moves the needle. I don't think it pushes the boundaries. But I'm not gonna sit here and cry about it. I think it's like insane. And the only people that would turn around and get like incredibly offended by this are psychos, especially critical race theory, right? Critical race theory is one way to describe the criminal justice system and the discrimination that it churns out, the way that the criminal justice system is designed, and how it leads to these horrible outcomes for black people and brown people. For people to get upset at that one way or the other is so weird, especially because it's not all that significant. Like, it's not going to get people to turn around and be like, oh yeah, you know what? I do have white fragility, or I do now believe that the criminal justice system is designed in a way that creates racial inequality in this country. Overall, turning this into a culture war is so weird. Like, turning this into a culture war is just exclusively to do more racial agitation. It's the backlash that Trump is trying to create around something that is not that significant overall, is just for culture war purposes. How is the idea of what he's saying any different than what they said at the DNC about how America's been a march forward towards progress? Republicans might be more overt in sweeping it under the rug, but at their core, it's the same Dems put a prettier bow on it. I think Americans don't want to think about the extrinsic factors that have played a significant role in why black and brown people are in the dire financial circumstances that they're in. They're the socioeconomic conditions that they've been subjected to.
Pervert.
I have plenty of critiques of the author, but the 1619 Project is historically accurate. Those who disagree with it are racist or believe in class reductionist shit over the literal history of America. What is the class reductionist argument against the 1619 Project? I don't even fully understand what here's the thing.
This is a deranged.
I don't understand how either side in that equation can talk about the fundamental role that slavery has played without talking about class, or the fundamental role that slavery has played and how different and unique it is without talking about specifically what has happened to black people and what has continued to happen to black people and what has continued to happen to brown people as well. I don't know. I feel like it's literally a both sides centrist argument here, that both sides play a significant role in this. The thing I will never understand is, like, are Democrats or liberals or like really just anti-left liberals, like, are they saying that racism is just racism and unique and they just wanted to have slaves because they were racist? I feel like that's a really stupid and ahistorical approach to how slavery came about, to all of the actions that our founders took in an effort to preserve the legacy of slavery, or in an effort to continue slavery. I think robbing it of the context of class does a disservice to understanding slavery's significant role in America's development. But also acting like everything can be reduced to class, acting like slavery or specifically slavery, black people being subjected to slavery erases the uniqueness of white supremacy in American development and how it's played a role in keeping black people down even to this day. The impact that it has on even contemporary black lifestyle and their current socioeconomic conditions. For example, we talk about FDR, right? And the New Deal and how important it was to rebuild America. It was incredibly important. New Deal was great. There were specific carve-outs for black workers, though, within that deal. And the only way to push it forward was to get Dixiecrats on board. There was no other way to legislate that at the time without leaving black people out specifically. So I completely understand why black leftists and black people as a whole in America would be suspicious of any sort of rhetoric that focuses on liberating working class Americans without also actually, placing a significant amount of emphasis or focus on black liberation on top of that and brown liberation on top of that. Because historically speaking, black people have been fucked over, even at times of economic prosperity or even at times when there were working class movements in this country. That's something that absolutely needs to be talked about specifically. Blacks are liberated. Class liberation would help everyone, especially the African-American minority, and be easier to sell to the general public. No, it wouldn't. And it historically hasn't. Like, first of all, I totally understand selling your concepts from the point of view of class, talking about uplifting white Americans as well as black Americans. I do. I talk about this all the time. If you want to sell your ideas, you have to give people something. You have to give everyone something, okay? Everyone that's going to vote for you needs to get something out of that. So, of course, focusing on class in that sense is good. But there's still additional problems on top of that you also have to admit and you also have to make efforts to solve. If we were just looking at uplifting everyone from the point of view of class, there are a bunch of problems that currently exist in our system that yields undesirable outcomes for black people over white people, even when adjusted to the material conditions that white people are subjected to. Even if when you make a comparison between poor white people in certain neighborhoods versus poor black people in certain neighborhoods, the crime rate, for example, does not immediately equalize. Certainly, poor white people commit more crimes than wealthy white people, but there are additional problems that you need to solve, and you can't solve them without admitting race and racism's role in American development. And we see with people like Kaepernick, James Blake, and many NBA players that being wealthy doesn't just stop racism. It can help insulate it, sure, but class doesn't just magically protect someone from systemic racism. It needs to be a separate discussion, like you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I say this a lot, but to me, I think saying that like LeBron James is in a worse off position than like a white homeless person is almost as idiotic as saying that a black person in a position of power is as fortunate as a white person in a comparable position of power. It's silly. I feel like both sides kind of try to avoid the reality. Hasan, I think you're missing an important factor. Money. It causes people to disregard race for prosperity. No, I'm not. The easiest way I can explain this is an example I give all the time. White people, white workers, are also oppressed under a capitalist organization of the economy. To say that has not existed, or to say that like white people are overall significantly more privileged than all black people is silly. White people, of course, are also oppressed under the same economic organization that they're subjected to. Okay, it's called capitalism. But black people are oppressed in that same economic organization. And then on top of that, they are oppressed by virtue of being black, by their skin color. It is a compounding factor. It's not that hard. It's literally not that hard to think about. If you have a middle class, if all other factors are adjusted, if you have a middle class black person, every single other factor is adjusted in the hypothetical, all the same. But you have a middle class black person and a middle class white person. A middle class white person is better off than the middle class black person because they are white. Okay, their children will be better off overall because they are white. That's white privilege. It's really, really difficult to comprehend because you can never have a perfectly equal situation where the only difference is black people and white people. Like the only difference is your skin color. So it's impossible for you to comprehend. So you immediately go to like these extreme hypotheticals where you think, you know, well, what about a homeless white person versus Oprah? Like, yeah, of course Oprah is better off than the homeless white person. Like, don't be insane. No one is saying that. Because in that circumstance, of course, the class positioning of a worker it overpowers the racial positioning of the wealthy person in the owner class. White people pay the biggest amount of taxes. The highest amount of people on government aid are black people, especially black women. The highest amount of single mothers are black mothers. Don't you think that there's a lack of family unity in black communities that makes things harder? So like, I would normally be like, you're racist and move on. But instead, I'm going to try to describe it to you once again. Why do you think black people overall are worse off than white people in this country? We just talked about the history of this. The reason why you have this opinion, the reason why you have this opinion where you otherize black people and think like, well, they just have bad family unity in black communities without any sort of external factors that you might place emphasis on or consider. 400 years of slavery, another additional 100 years of systemic discrimination in the form of segregation in the Jim Crow South and redlining and segregation in the North as well. Jim Crow laws also exist in the North, something that isn't really taught that much in schools. And the war on drugs and the criminalization of poverty in this country that specifically was designed to harm black and brown communities, and our criminal justice system that's still adjusted for all other factors creates a disproportionately worse off outcome for black people. Don't you think that plays a factor? Or do you think it's just my rap music, my black culture, as though white culture does not have like really silly, idiotic, and harmful cultural stereotypes that we just look at and we laugh at because as white people are the dominant group, you have the concept of understanding, you have the comprehension to know that like when white people do something specifically, it's not all white people.